Welcome to Raw Talent, a podcast from Shore Capital Partners focused on the real work of developing people and building stronger organizations. In this series, members of our talent development team have candid conversations about what it really takes to grow leaders and strengthen teams. Talent development is not just a program. It's the everyday work of coaching, feedback, stretch opportunities, and accountability that shapes performance over time. Each episode explores the real challenges companies face when developing people and the lessons learned along the way. All right, welcome back to the second episode of Raw Talent Season 2. As we talked about at the end of the first episode, we're going to move into a conversation around root cause analysis for people problems.
Yes.
We talked a bit there at the end about performance management. And then one thing we kept kind of coming back to was clarity. Do folks in this kind of, do we keep them, do we move them on situation, do they know what they're supposed to be doing? Have we had that conversation with them? Have you, as a leader, evaluated what you actually need to give them to perform well, starting with what they're supposed to do? And so the point of this episode is really simple. It's just slow down and do the diagnostic work. And so let's start with probably the hardest question for a leader, which is, have you actually done your own work first? And why is that so hard for leaders to answer?
Well, your own work is always the hardest work. It's always easier to point out and look at what everybody else is doing wrong or incompletely or how they're underperforming. And I think in the spirit of this conversation, it's that question of, this person on my team isn't performing. Why? Not this person on my team isn't performing. What am I going to do? If we can ask that question, and we assume, as I often share with groups, that most people don't wake up in the morning aspiring to be mediocre team members, then there's something driving their underperformance. And so I think just pausing and asking why, and before thinking about the action around what, is part of that step toward making the self-reflection process for the leader a little easier, and not necessarily feel like I'm pausing and reflecting, but I'm just giving a breath of grace to the situation before reacting.
One trick for that I have learned over time is it's the 5 why approach. So you don't just ask yourself why once. You say, and what else? And why is that the case? And something that's probably terribly annoying when a child hears it from their parents. I happen to know that personally. But it does work, and it helps you really start to calm the emotion and look at things a little bit more clearly. If you kind of force yourself to think about that and answer that question multiple times, you start to drill down to something that's pretty core and obvious. It's like, well, why aren't they doing what I need them to do? I don't know. Maybe I didn't tell them what they needed to do, or they're doing it, but they're not doing it this way. Okay. And then it just brings out a whole nother layer.
I sent it in an email and I never followed up.
And maybe they didn't read the email, and maybe that's not the most effective way for me to communicate with them.
Right.
So I think it is coming back to what is that ownership, and all of us as managers and leaders, the performance of our people in our organization lies at our feet.
I think we talked in the first episode about rapid growth and the nature of the context. I think one of the reasons you pause, in particular in this environment, is because you often, and we often see in our work, all three of us, I'm sure, is a situation where someone was performing well and now they're not. That's even more reason to pause and say why. Like, what has changed? We're in a rapidly changing environment. Maybe they have new colleagues. Maybe they're using new technology. Maybe they're confused about new expectations now that there's somebody else with their same title sitting next to them. And there's all of these other reasons. And especially in that situation where someone doesn't seem to be keeping up, or they used to perform well and now they're not, to pause and do that exact diagnosis Cynthia's talking about.
You're highlighting on some of these kind of dimensions or buckets outside of just role clarity.
Yep.
And so let's actually tease that out a bit. Let's assume that the leader has had the conversation around role clarity. They're confident that they know that this person that's in their mind knows what is expected of them. What are some of these other things that leaders should be thinking about? Like inside of context, inside of decision rights. What should leaders be thinking about?
I think we said it earlier, but another trick is really breaking it down into the buckets of will, skill, and fit. And I think that is helpful for anyone to start kind of segmenting their thoughts and their ideas. Is this person skilled to do it? Do they want to do it? And sometimes that gets to the role clarity of like, do they even know what it is to be able to know if they want to do it? And sometimes what we do is we have these conversations with ourselves instead of with the actual person. So we're guessing and we're making assumptions around what their skills are and what their will is and how much of a fit they are for the role. So I think that is the other thing. You do that yourself, because we say as a manager, as a leader, you need to do your own work, and you don't draw your own conclusions without more information.
I think it's interesting because those three often get confused. Like when you really break it down and have the conversation, it seems like, well, yeah, I know what skill is, I know what will is, I know what fit is. But as leaders really start to grapple with that with the people they support, it gets really messy. Why?
I'll go back to something we said in the first episode, emotion. You project what you think it is that fits your level of frustration or whatever your personal need. It's not sitting, it's not pausing and having that conversation to say, I know this isn't exactly the job you were hired for, but this is the job now. It is coming from the intensity of reaction and emotion. So I can and it goes back to even the complexity of something we said earlier too. This person, I've created some assumptions about their will along the way. So I'm going to assume this is will. This person, I've had questions about their fit with our whole company all along. So in this situation, I'm going to assume this is, and so we just aggregate those things rather than treat the scenario and the situation at hand as the situation at hand.
I was actually leading a session earlier today with a company, and the title was reframing change as growth.
Yeah.
And we hit on this idea of technical versus adaptive change. Technical being this idea that there is an expert that can solve it. There is a known answer with a new manual, a new training, a new whatever. You can do it.
That feels so much comfortable for people.
Right.
I can touch it.
But then on the flip side, and this is what we don't often pause to think about, is that adaptive, the adaptive challenge inside of that. And the reason why is because there isn't an expert to solve that. With a technical problem, it's the person who has the problem that can make the change. So it can kind of be done outside to them. Whereas with an adaptive challenge, the person is the one who has to do the work. They're the ones who have to change their values, their mindsets, their beliefs about their role. And some people want to do that more than others. I would argue that coachability is probably one of the main factors I would think about and consider in these conversations.
And alignment, and that's where you get down to. I think that's when you comes down to fit, right? Like, I'm coachable. I've got the skill. I don't want to do that thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's not interesting to me. Don't want to do it. Chances are pretty good if I have like this, I may not actually have the skill, but so I think that is kind of important. But I wholeheartedly agree with you on the adaptive change and the behaviors that need to change in order to deliver that like sustainably. And that's where we start to talk about the environment really playing a role. And what is the environment that you are creating that is helping people to thrive in those situations and feel comfortable making a change? In the last session, I think we talked about, maybe you didn't say psychological safety, but essentially it was, hey, is it okay for me to like miss every once in a while, because that's part of my growth process. So are we building that kind of environment in, or are people too afraid to try something new or do something different because they don't think that's going to be okay if they fail?
Well, with that in mind, when do these individual people problems start to signal to a leader, wait a second, this isn't a people problem anymore, it's a system problem? Like, when do you start to recognize that? What are some of the kind of check engine lights?
Well, I mean, it starts with you're seeing the same thing in different ways across different people or different teams or different departments and so forth. I think part of this conversation from the perspective of the leader is that, again, you can't overemphasize the environment that our companies and we live and work in, is that technical change is not only feels simpler, like pull it off the shelf, it also, if it's the right answer, is faster.
Absolutely.
And a lot less messy, right? And so it is the default for that reason. And so I think part of what you look is you say, a leader decides, well, we need to improve our onboarding, or we need to improve these sort of our product knowledge across our sales team, or whatever that are these kind of technical approaches. The signal is when those things still exist once people seem to have all of the expert knowledge that needs to be there, or the support that needs to be there, and you're still seeing these kinds of patterns of behavior, right? That's where you start to shift in that idea of will and fit, because to your point, somebody can be great and have all the skills in the world. I had this situation with the previous company, had a great software engineer. We were a startup. And he came in and was doing a great job, was going above and beyond, doing documentation and communicating well and doing all these things. I was like, God, this guy, and so we're young. We were a team of like 4 or 5 at the time. And we're like, I think we need to talk to this guy about, potentially becoming a proper CTO for us. Well, he shut that down in that conversation and was gone in 60 days. He said, I do not want to be a CTO. I want to come and work an 8 to 5, and I do not want any of that. He had all the ability in the world. And I wish we had that conversation when we interviewed him.
Yeah.
Because the fit was never there. The fit was a mirage. Our skill need was so high that he was adding immediate value, and it was great. So no judgment to him. But arriving at that answer 8-10 months down the road, and then losing that person after you've maybe started to do some planning around them, or you've invested in the team around them, that's a big cost. I wish we'd had that conversation about the type of work environment. To your point earlier, having the conversation like, hey, here's your job description, and it's going to change. Hey, here's what the company looks like, and by the time you get here in 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever, it's going to look different, so that people understand when you're hiring new that that's just the reality of the environment.
The other thing, I think there are also some really simple signals that happen. Attrition.
Yeah.
People leave. And there's also, you can start to sense a lack of engagement or distancing that people will start to have. Are there not as many people who are like congregating in the lunchroom? Did people used to come by your office and chat, and now they don't do that anymore? I think there are those like very subtle but very distinct changes in the organizational's behavior that are signals that something is shifting.
I was just going to say, I love those, because we talk a lot about becoming an observer of your teams. And so you're not jumping to the conclusion that it's a fit thing. You're not projecting but that you're just observing behavior. And what you're describing is stop and observe the behavior. And if you're seeing fewer conversations, you're seeing people used to eat lunch together and now they don't eat lunch together. Or, during these times, it used to be really loud and boisterous, and now it's not anymore. Those are signals you should pay attention to.
I think that's actually a perfect transition into episode 3.
Yay!
And so I want to land the plane here before we do that. But before we do, I just want to kind of get this takeaway. Before we as leaders start to diagnose people as the problem, what we really have to do is pause and say, did they have clarity on their role? What were they coached around? How were they measured? What was measured? And then once we have those answers, really start to take a level up and say, what's the pattern around them inside of their context? Because as you mentioned with the example at your past company, we waste a lot of time and energy and effort, money, investing in, helping solve individual people problems versus saying, wait a second, this is a broader problem. And one way that we can do that effectively is with a strong performance management system. And so in our next episode, what we're going to touch on is what should our performance management system measure? And is it telling us the truth?
Love it.
All right. If you enjoyed this episode, Check out other Raw Talent episodes at www.shorecp.university/podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. Here you will find our Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Microcap Moments, and Everyday Heroes series, each highlighting the people and stories that make investing in the lower middle market unique. This podcast was narrated by Jackson Sprayberry, created and produced by Austin Johnson, editing by Podhouse Productions. This podcast is the property of Shore Capital Partners, LLC. None of the content herein is investment advice, an offer of investment advisory services, nor a recommendation or offer relating to any security. See the Terms of Use page on the Shore Capital website for other important information.